The laughter bounced off the marble walls of Mitchell Technologies, sounding like shattered glass. Each burst of it stabbed deeper into Zara Washington's chest as she stood, paralyzed, just outside the conference room door. She'd come to deliver the quarterly reports Ryan Mitchell had requested. Now, she bitterly regretted ever leaving her desk on the 42nd floor. "Come on, Ryan. You can't seriously be thinking of bringing your little assistant to the charity gala," drawled the voice of Brandon Hayes, the irritatingly arrogant heir to a hotel fortune. "She's so plain and boring. I bet she shops at discount stores and has never even seen the inside of a decent restaurant." Zara's hand trembled as she clutched the folder holding the reports. Peeking through the sliver of space between the door and the frame, she could see her boss, Ryan Mitchell, casually leaning back in his expensive leather chair. His dark, perfectly styled hair gleamed, catching the late afternoon sunlight streaming through the massive floor-to-ceiling windows. He was, as always, surrounded by his gaggle of disgustingly wealthy friends, treating his corner office like their own private clubhouse. I mean, what would she even wear? Chelsea Blackwood, the spoiled daughter of some media giant who had been desperately trying to snag Ryan's attention for months, shrieked with laughter. Does she even own a dress that costs more than like $50? The photographers would have a field day. It'd be poor little assistant trying to play dress up with the elite. Ryan's icy blue eyes glinted with cruel amusement as he glanced around at his assembled sycophants. "You know what? You're absolutely right. It would be hilarious to see her try to fit in with our crowd. Can you even imagine her face when she realizes she doesn't belong?" Tyler Constantine, whose family owned what felt like half the real estate in the entire city, urged him on. "Do it, Ryan. Invite her as your date. It'll be the joke of the century. We can all watch her stumble around in cheap shoes, probably spilling wine all over herself." Ryan finally stood, smoothly adjusting the cut of his obscenely expensive suit jacket. "Fine. I'll invite Zara Washington to be my date to the most exclusive charity event of the year. But let's be real, people. We all know how this is going to end. She'll probably wimp out with some excuse about being sick or needing to wash her hair. And if she actually does show up?" Chelsea asked, her voice practically vibrating with anticipation. "Then we'll all get the distinct entertainment of watching her realize she's completely, utterly out of her league," Ryan replied, his voice suddenly as cold and calculating as a computer algorithm. "It'll teach her to know her place." The group erupted in another chorus of laughter, and Zara felt her face burn with shame and humiliation. She had worked for Ryan Mitchell for 2 solid years, putting in ridiculous 12-hour days, meticulously managing his impossible schedule, efficiently handling all of his business affairs, and generally making his pampered life easier in countless ways. She had always been professional, efficient, and unfailingly respectful. She had even, if she were being brutally honest with herself, convinced herself that beneath his arrogant exterior, there might actually be a decent human being hidden somewhere inside. But now she knew the cold, hard truth. To Ryan Mitchell and his shallow, wealthy friends, she was nothing more than a source of amusement. A poor girl from the wrong side of the tracks who dared to work in their glittering ivory tower of privilege. "Should we even bet on whether she'll actually show up?" Brandon asked, already pulling out his ridiculously overpriced phone. "I've got $1,000 that says she chickens out and makes up an excuse." "Make it 5,000. Chelsea chimed in, her voice dripping with venomous certainty. "There is absolutely no way she has the guts to actually walk into that ballroom. She knows she doesn't belong with people like us." Zara's heart hammered so violently in her chest she was afraid it might actually explode. She wanted to run back to her tiny, cramped desk, grab her purse, and never, ever return to this building again. She wanted to disappear completely and never have to face the mortification of seeing these awful, soulless people ever again. But then something deep inside her, a stubborn, unyielding pride she had inherited directly from her grandmother, a woman who had cleaned houses to put food on the table, made her stand a little straighter. She forced herself to knock on the door. "Come in," Ryan called out, his voice instantly returning to its usual, practiced professional tone. Zara stepped into the room, carefully keeping her expression neutral and composed despite the burning rage that threatened to consume her from the inside out. She was wearing her standard work uniform, a simple, conservative navy blue blouse and a plain black skirt. Her long, natural hair was pulled back in a severely neat bun, and she wore only the barest minimum of makeup, which served to subtly highlight her naturally warm brown skin. She knew she wasn't glamorous or polished like the women in this room, but she also knew, deep down, that she was intelligent, hardworking, and undeniably worthy of respect. "The quarterly reports you requested, Mr. Mitchell," she said quietly, placing the thick folder precisely on his desk. Her voice was perfectly steady, giving no indication whatsoever that she had just overheard their unbelievably cruel conversation. Ryan looked up at her, his calculating blue eyes narrowed, and she could practically see the wheels turning inside his head. "Actually, Zara, I have something I wanted to ask you." The room fell instantly silent. Chelsea, Brandon, and Tyler all leaned forward almost imperceptibly, barely able to contain their excitement for the humiliating spectacle that was about to unfold. "The Henderson Foundation Charity Gala is this Saturday night," Ryan continued, his tone infuriatingly casual, as if he were merely discussing the weather or the latest stock market report. "It's a very important event for the company's image. I need a date, and I was wondering if you would consider accompanying me." Zara felt the blood drain completely from her face. She glanced around the room at the smirking, self-satisfied faces of Ryan's friends, then back at him. She knew with a sickening certainty that this was a setup, a carefully orchestrated cruel joke designed solely to humiliate her. Every single instinct she possessed screamed at her to politely decline and salvage what little remained of her dignity. But then she thought about her mother, lying in a hospital bed and bravely fighting cancer, telling her to never, ever let anyone make her feel small or insignificant. She thought about her grandmother's unwavering words, "Baby, you're just as good as anybody else in this world. Don't you ever forget that, not even for a second." "I would be honored to attend with you, Mr. Mitchell," she said, her voice surprisingly clear and strong despite the turmoil raging inside her. "What time should I be ready?" The look of genuine surprise on Ryan's face was quickly replaced by that familiar, cruelly amused smile. "The car will pick you up at 7 sharp. This black tie, of course. Very formal, very exclusive. The guest list includes senators, movie stars, and the wealthiest, most influential families in the entire country. You know, our kind of people." "I understand," Zara replied calmly, refusing to let him see her sweat. "Is there anything else you need from me today?" "No, that's all. You can go." Zara nodded curtly and turned to leave, feeling their collective eyes boring into her back as she walked out of the room. The very moment the door closed behind her, she heard the explosion of uncontrolled laughter and excited chatter. "Oh my God! She actually said yes. This is going to be absolutely incredible. I seriously cannot wait to see what she shows up wearing. It's going to be epic." Zara walked back to her desk on legs that felt suspiciously like jelly, her mind still reeling from what had just transpired. She sank into her chair and stared blankly at her computer screen, the numbers and letters blurring together as tears threatened to spill over. She had just inexplicably agreed to attend the most exclusive social event of the year with a man who saw her as nothing more than a source of amusement for his shallow, horrible friends. She now had 3 days, a mere 72 hours, to somehow figure out how to walk into a room full of millionaires and billionaires without completely and utterly humiliating herself. But even as fear and doubt crept insidiously into her mind, that stubborn, unyielding pride burned even brighter. Ryan Mitchell and his smug, entitled friends fully expected her to fail spectacularly. They expected her to prove, beyond any shadow of a doubt, that she didn't belong in their rarefied world. They were absolutely counting on her to be the joke they could all laugh about for months to come. Well, Zara Washington had news for them. She might not have been born with a silver spoon in her mouth, but she was undeniably smart. She was fiercely strong, and she was just about to show them exactly what they had so foolishly underestimated. The game was officially on, and they had absolutely no idea what was coming their way. Zara's hands trembled slightly as she fumbled with the keys and unlocked the front door to her small, cramped apartment in Brooklyn. The 20-minute subway ride from Manhattan had given her some time to think, but now the full, crushing weight of what she had just agreed to do was crashing down on her like a massive tidal wave. She dropped her worn purse unceremoniously on the second-hand couch and sank into the surprisingly comfortable cushions, finally allowing the tears she had been desperately holding back to spill freely down her face. The humiliation burned in her chest like corrosive acid. For 2 long years, she had meticulously maintained a perfectly professional relationship with Ryan Mitchell. She had efficiently handled his demanding schedule, expertly managed all of his business correspondence, and patiently dealt with his unpredictable moods with unwavering efficiency. She had even, much to her own secret shame, developed a bit of a crush on him, despite his consistently arrogant exterior. There had been moments, fleeting glimpses, when she thought she had caught sight of something deeper within him. The way he worked late into the night on a project he was genuinely passionate about, or the time she had quietly noticed him donating money to causes he actually cared about, without seeking any publicity or recognition for his generosity. She had, against all logical reason, convinced herself that maybe, just maybe, there was a fundamentally good man hidden somewhere deep beneath all that glittering wealth and suffocating privilege. How utterly, painfully wrong she had been. Her phone buzzed insistently with a text message from her best friend, Lily. *, how was work today? You seemed stressed this morning. *, Zara stared at the message for a long, silent moment before finally summoning the courage to call her friend. Lily answered on the very first ring. Girl, what's wrong? You sound like something awful just happened. Lily, I need to tell you something, and you're probably going to think I've completely lost my mind. Zara took a shaky deep breath and then proceeded to explain everything that had happened. From accidentally overhearing the shockingly cruel conversation to inexplicably accepting Ryan's patently ridiculous invitation. There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line that stretched for what felt like an eternity. Zara Washington, please tell me you did not just agree to go to some fancy party with that man after hearing him talk about you like that. I seriously hope you're joking. I know how it sounds, but nothing. Baby, that man just showed you exactly who he is. Why on earth would you put yourself through that kind of public humiliation? Zara wiped her eyes and stood up, nervously pacing her small, cluttered living room. Because I'm so unbelievably tired of people like him thinking they can just treat people like me as their personal entertainment. I'm tired of being invisible, of being seen as less than human simply because I don't happen to have a trust fund the size of Rhode Island. So what exactly are you planning to do? Show up in your work clothes and basically prove their incredibly awful point? No, absolutely not. Zara's voice grew noticeably stronger, laced with a newfound determination. I'm going to show up looking absolutely incredible, and I'm going to hold my head high while I do it. I'm going to prove, once and for all, that I belong anywhere I damn well choose to be. Lily sighed heavily. Okay, I hear you. But honey, do you have any idea how much it actually costs to look rich? We're talking thousands and thousands of dollars for a designer dress, shoes, jewelry, hair, makeup, the works. I have some money saved up. Zara walked into her tiny bedroom and pulled out a small, dented metal box from under her bed. Inside was the emergency fund she had been diligently building for the past 3 years. Hard-earned money she had always planned to use for her mother's mounting medical bills, or other unexpected, life-altering expenses. I've got about $1,500. Girl, that's not nearly enough for everything you're going to need. Then I'll figure out how to make it enough. Zara's determination was growing stronger by the minute, solidifying into something unbreakable. Lily, I really need your help. You work in fashion. You know all about this stuff. Help me transform myself into someone who looks like she belongs in that world, even if it's just for one night. Another long, drawn-out pause followed. You're really serious about this, aren't you? Dead serious. Okay. Lily's voice suddenly took on a serious, businesslike tone. Then we're going to do this right. No half measures. If you're going to walk into that party, you're going to look like you own the entire damn place. Meet me tomorrow after work. We're going shopping and I'm calling in some favors. Get ready because this is going to be a major operation. After hanging up the phone, Zara sat heavily on her bed and looked around her modest apartment. The furniture was mostly secondhand, a mismatched collection of cast-offs and bargain basement finds. But she had managed to make it feel warm and inviting with colorful throw pillows and a surprisingly thriving collection of houseplants that somehow managed to flourish despite the limited sunlight. Pictures of her family covered one entire wall. Her mother, looking strong and proud in her crisp white nurse's uniform. Her grandmother, dignified and elegant in her Sunday best. Assorted cousins and aunts who had all worked tirelessly to build better lives for their children and grandchildren. She thought about her mother, currently undergoing grueling chemotherapy treatments at Brooklyn Methodist Hospital. Carmen Washington had worked tirelessly as a nurse, often pulling exhausting double shifts, for over 30 years, putting herself through nursing school while simultaneously raising Zara as a single mother. She had never once complained, never made Zara feel like a burden, and had always, unfailingly, emphasized the paramount importance of both education and relentless hard work. Success isn't about the money you make, her mother always said firmly. It's about the respect you earn and the positive difference you make in the world. But respect was exactly what Zara felt she was desperately fighting for right now. She was sick and tired of being overlooked, dismissed, and generally treated as if her inherent worth was determined solely by the fluctuating balance in her bank account. She opened her laptop and began researching the Henderson Foundation Charity Gala, poring over every detail she could find. The glossy photos from previous years showed her exactly what she was up against. Women in obscenely expensive designer gowns that cost more than Zara made in 6 months, dripping with dazzling jewelry, their hair and makeup flawlessly executed by teams of highly paid professionals. But as she scrolled through the endless images, she began to notice something else. For all their obvious wealth and carefully cultivated beauty, many of these women looked strangely similar, almost like clones. The same perfectly straight hair, the same expertly tanned skin, the same practiced, vacant smiles. They looked, she realized with a sudden flash of insight, like they were all playing a part, wearing an elaborate costume of wealth and privilege. Maybe that's exactly what she needed to do. Maybe the secret wasn't to try to actually become one of them, but to simply play the role so convincingly well that they would never even suspect that she was anything other than their complete equal. Her phone rang, abruptly interrupting her intense thoughts. The caller ID showed her mother's number. "Hi, Mom. How are you feeling today?" "Better, baby. The new medication is really helping with the nausea." "How was work?" Zara hesitated. Her mother was already dealing with enough stress and anxiety without having to worry about her daughter's problems as well. "It was interesting. I might actually have a special event to attend this weekend." "Oh, what kind of event?" "Just a charity gala. For work." "That sounds absolutely wonderful, Mija. You work so incredibly hard. It's so nice that they're finally including you in something special." If only her mother knew just how special this particular invitation actually was. "Mom, do you remember what Grandma always used to say about holding your head high?" Carmen's voice softened perceptibly. "She used to say that no one could ever make you feel inferior without your express permission." "Why are you asking, baby?" "Just thinking about her lately. I love you, Mom. Get some rest." After hanging up, Zara made a firm decision. She was absolutely going to attend that gala, and she was going to do a lot more than just passively show up. She was going to prove, once and for all, that a person's true worth had absolutely nothing to do with the arbitrary circumstances of their birth and everything to do with the fundamental content of their character. She opened a notebook and began making lists. What she would absolutely need, how much it would likely cost, and, most importantly, precisely how she would conduct herself once she walked into that ridiculously opulent ballroom. This wasn't just about a dress and expertly applied makeup. This was about meticulously preparing for the most crucial performance of her entire life. She had 3 short days to completely transform herself from Ryan Mitchell's routinely overlooked and routinely underestimated assistant into a confident, poised woman who could command respect in absolutely any room, regardless of how exclusive or intimidating it might be. It seemed, on the surface, almost entirely impossible, but as her grandmother always used to say, impossible is just another word for something that nobody's tried hard enough to do yet. The game had officially begun, and Zara Washington was fully prepared to play to win. Ryan Mitchell stood alone in his expansive penthouse apartment, silently staring out at the dazzling Manhattan skyline as the setting sun cast long, dramatic shadows behind the towering buildings. The city looked undeniably beautiful from up here, a breathtaking panorama of glittering lights and seemingly endless possibilities. But tonight, the spectacular view that usually brought him a sense of calm and peace only served to remind him of how deeply isolated he truly felt, suspended high above the real world in his lonely, sterile tower of glass and steel. He impatiently loosened his impeccably tailored tie and poured himself a generous glass of expensive whiskey, the very same brand his late father had always preferred. The entire apartment was a meticulously crafted monument to success. Original, priceless artwork adorning the walls, impossibly chic furniture that cost more than most people's entire cars, and state-of-the-art technology that could probably run a small, moderately sized country. But for all its undeniable luxury and ostentatious displays of wealth, it felt cold and unsettlingly empty, like a perfectly preserved museum exhibit titled, "How the Rich Live." His phone buzzed insistently with a barrage of text messages from his eagerly anticipating friends, all predictably excited about the upcoming Saturday night's entertainment. Brandon had already, predictably, started a crude group chat called Assistant Watch 2025, where they were placing increasingly ridiculous bets on everything from what Zara would wear, or, more accurately, what they thought she would wear, to whether she would even possess the audacity to actually show up at all. "This is going to be truly legendary," Tyler had predictably written. "I'm even bringing my photographer friend along to expertly capture the precise moment when she finally realizes that she's completely, utterly in over her head. Just make absolutely sure you get plenty of close-up pictures of her face when she finally sees all the other women there." Chelsea had gleefully added, her text dripping with barely concealed malice. "This is going to be so much fun." Ryan abruptly set his phone down on the sleek glass table without bothering to respond. When he had first impulsively made the invitation, surrounded by his friends' collective laughter and unspoken expectations, it had honestly seemed like harmless fun. Zara was, after all, just his dutiful assistant. She was simply part of the background of his carefully curated life, always efficient and largely invisible, like the obscenely expensive coffee machine in his office or the equally luxurious car service that discreetly chauffeured him around the city. But now, alone in his impeccably decorated apartment, he was starting to feel something he rarely ever experienced, a nagging sense of doubt. He walked slowly to his sparsely furnished home office and pulled out Zara's relatively thin employment file. Her resume was, objectively, quite impressive. A hard-earned degree in business administration from City College, where she had graduated summa cum laude while working multiple part-time jobs to pay for her own tuition and living expenses. Her references from previous jobs all effusively praised her sharp intelligence, unwavering reliability, and impeccable professionalism. She had even been deservedly named Employee of the Month, no less than 3 separate times in her very first year at Mitchell Technologies. Ryan suddenly realized, with a somewhat unsettling jolt, that he actually knew almost absolutely nothing about her personal life. In the 2 years that they had been working closely together, their conversations had remained almost entirely strictly professional. He knew, of course, that she was consistently punctual, undeniably thorough, and never once complained about his often ridiculously demanding schedule or his frequently unreasonable requests. She had somehow managed to skillfully handle countless hostile clients, miraculously meet seemingly impossible deadlines, and patiently tolerate even his own undeniably bad moods with remarkable grace and unwavering efficiency. But he didn't know where, exactly, she lived, what she actually did on weekends, or what secret hopes and quiet dreams she might harbor beyond meticulously organizing his calendar and efficiently managing his business correspondence. The vivid memory of her fleeting, carefully concealed expression when he had initially extended the absurd invitation came sharply back to him now. For just a brief, almost imperceptible moment, before she had swiftly composed herself, he thought he had seen something in her normally guarded eyes that genuinely resembled hurt. It had been quickly, almost instantly, replaced by the practiced professional mask she always wore so flawlessly. But now he suddenly wondered if he had actually imagined that brief, almost imperceptible flash of pain. His intercom buzzed quietly, shattering his troubled thoughts. "Mr. Mitchell, your dinner has arrived." "Thank you, Marcus. Just leave it in the kitchen." Marcus had been Ryan's quietly efficient doorman and building manager for the past 5 years. He was a kind, hard-working man in his late 60s who had immigrated from Jamaica and worked tirelessly at multiple jobs to single-handedly support his growing family. Ryan had always been consistently polite to him, but they had never really had a genuine conversation beyond perfunctory pleasantries about the fluctuating weather or routine building maintenance. "Marcus, can I ask you something?" The older man paused, visibly surprised by the unusual request. "Of course, Mr. Mitchell. Anything you need. If someone were to invite you to a particular event, fully knowing that you might not necessarily fit in with the other attendees, would you still actually go?" Marcus carefully considered the somewhat abstract question. "Well, sir, I suppose it would really depend on why they were inviting me. If they were honestly trying to help me in some way or to genuinely include me in something good, I might actually be grateful for the opportunity. But if they were simply inviting me in order to make fun of me or to publicly humiliate me," he simply shrugged his broad shoulders. "I'd probably still go, sir, but I'd make damn sure that I held my head up high while I was there. Even if you knew that people would be watching you closely, just waiting for you to fail spectacularly?" "Especially then, sir," Marcus replied with a knowing glint in his kind eyes. "Sometimes the very best way to effectively handle people who habitually underestimate you is to simply prove them completely wrong." After Marcus quietly left the apartment, Ryan found himself still deeply contemplating their unexpected conversation. He tried, with some difficulty, to recall the last time he had actually genuinely connected with another human being, had a real, meaningful conversation about something that actually mattered. His circle of wealthy friends were, admittedly, reliably entertaining, but their carefully cultivated relationships were largely built on a foundation of shared privilege and thinly veiled mutual benefit. His fleeting romantic relationships had been similarly superficial, consisting of beautiful, polished women who were invariably far more interested in his sizable bank account than they were in his actual personality. He thought sadly about his parents, who had tragically died in a horrific car accident when he was just 25 years old, leaving him as the sole, unexpectedly burdened heir to a vast, sprawling technology empire worth billions of dollars. His father had been a brilliant, if somewhat ruthless, businessman but also emotionally distant, almost always primarily focused on the next lucrative deal or the latest strategic acquisition. His mother had been a kind, well-meaning woman but was also constantly overwhelmed by the suffocating demands of high society, perpetually worried about appearances and maintaining their carefully crafted social status. Ryan had undeniably inherited their considerable wealth and their coveted place in the upper echelons of society, but he had never really learned how to form genuine, lasting connections with other people. His undeniable success in the competitive world of business came largely from his sharp intelligence and ruthless efficiency, but his woefully neglected personal life was just a shallow series of fleeting relationships and ultimately meaningless encounters. He walked slowly to his spacious bedroom and opened the expansive closet where his formal wear hung in perfectly ordered rows. Dozens of impeccably tailored, obscenely expensive suits and meticulously crafted tuxedos, each one a painstakingly constructed costume for expertly playing the role of the successful, powerful billionaire. He had been expertly playing that role for so long now that he sometimes actually forgot who he really was deep down underneath all the layers of inherited wealth and carefully maintained social status. The simple, unvarnished truth was that he was undeniably lonely. Despite being constantly surrounded by hordes of people who ostensibly wanted his attention, his money, or his considerable influence, he couldn't even remember the last time someone had actually looked at him and seen just plain Ryan, not Ryan Mitchell the untouchable billionaire. Maybe that's precisely why he had so impulsively agreed to his friend's undeniably cruel suggestion. Maybe he had simply become so utterly used to being seen as a mere symbol of wealth and power that he had inadvertently forgotten how to actually treat other people as real human beings with genuine emotions and real, tangible feelings. His phone rang again, rudely interrupting his troubled thoughts. It was his longtime business partner and oldest friend, Alex Chin. "Hey man, I heard about your somewhat ill-advised gala date from Brandon. Are you really actually going through with this? It's just a harmless joke, Alex. She probably won't even actually show up. Anyway. Ryan, I've met your assistant a few times. She seems like a genuinely nice person. Are you absolutely sure that this is really the kind of thing you want to be publicly known for? What exactly do you mean by that? I just mean that you're already unfortunately developing a somewhat unsettling reputation for being cold and utterly ruthless in business. Do you really want to publicly add cruel to employees to that already unflattering list? Ryan was unusually quiet for a long, contemplative moment. Alex was one of the very few people in his increasingly isolated life who ever genuinely questioned his decisions or felt comfortable challenging his predictably questionable behavior. It was one of the primary reasons that their unexpectedly enduring friendship had actually lasted all the way back since their tumultuous college days. Maybe you're right, Alex, Ryan said finally, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. Maybe I really should just call the whole thing off. Or, alternatively, maybe you could actually try to show her a genuinely good time. When was the last time you actually went to one of these ridiculous events with someone who wasn't trying desperately to impress you or just subtly use you for something? After reluctantly hanging up the phone, Ryan sat heavily back down in his overstuffed leather chair and thought deeply about Alex's uncomfortably honest words. When was the last time he had spent any significant amount of time with someone who genuinely didn't want something tangible from him? Someone who had simply seen him as a regular person rather than just a walking, talking bank account. He thought somewhat guiltily about Zara again, vividly remembering the way she unfailingly handled even the most difficult situations at work with remarkable calm professionalism. She never once asked him for any personal favors, never tried to leverage their existing working relationship for personal gain, and never actually seemed particularly impressed by his substantial wealth or his considerable social status. In fact, she was undeniably one of the very few people in his increasingly insulated life who consistently treated him like a normal human being. Maybe that's precisely why his shallow friends found the somewhat absurd idea of her as his date so inherently amusing. She was undeniably real in a way that most of the carefully curated people in his meticulously constructed social circle simply weren't. She worked incredibly hard for everything that she had personally achieved, and she never pretended to be something that she simply wasn't. But it was likely far too late now to change his mind and gracefully back out of the whole ridiculous charade. The impulsive invitation had already been extended, and she had, somewhat inexplicably, accepted it. His shallow friends were now eagerly expecting a highly entertaining show, and backing out at this late stage would only serve to make things even worse for both of them. All he could realistically do at this point was sincerely hope that somehow, against all reasonable odds, this whole misguided mess wouldn't actually devolve into the catastrophic disaster that everyone was fully expecting. As he wearily prepared for bed, he couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that he had somehow inadvertently set into motion a chain of events that he was now powerless to stop. Ryan came to a firm decision. No matter what transpired at the gala, he was determined to conduct himself like a true gentleman. His priority would be ensuring Zara was treated with the utmost respect, and he would do everything within his power to make sure she enjoyed herself, regardless of the fact that his initial intentions might not have been so pure. It wasn't much, he figured, but it was a start in the right direction. Zara stood transfixed before the mirror in the cozy Brooklyn boutique, barely able to reconcile the reflection staring back at her with her own image. The transformation had been a meticulous, 3-day endeavor, and the results exceeded her wildest expectations. "Girl, I'm seriously about to lose it," Lily exclaimed, her voice thick with emotion. "You look absolutely breathtaking." The dress was a genuine work of art, crafted from a deep emerald green silk that clung to Zara's curves in all the right places before cascading into an elegant train. Lily had unearthed it at a consignment shop on the Upper East Side, a designer gown that had been worn only once by a prominent socialite who had then donated it for tax purposes. The rich color accentuated the warm, golden undertones in Zara's brown skin, causing her dark eyes to sparkle like precious jewels. "Are you positive about these shoes?" Zara questioned, wobbling slightly in the 4-inch heels that added a dramatic boost to her height. "Trust me on this one," Lily reassured her. "Walking in heels is just like riding a bike. Once you find your rhythm, you'll glide across that floor like you were born to wear them. Lily knelt down to adjust the straps. Remember what we practiced? Small steps, weight on your toes, and keep that core engaged. The preceding 3 days had been a whirlwind of preparation, depleting Zara's savings but simultaneously revitalizing her confidence. Lily had leveraged favors from her extensive network within the fashion industry, securing a talented hairstylist who specialized in natural hair textures. They had made the conscious decision to celebrate Zara's natural curls, rather than attempting to straighten them, crafting an elegant updo that beautifully showcased her graceful neck and delicate features. The makeup application had been another revelation entirely. Instead of trying to conceal her natural beauty, the artist had amplified it, employing rich, complementary colors that enhanced her skin tone and dramatic techniques that made her eyes appear larger and more expressive. The end result was both sophisticated and striking, without appearing overdone or gaudy. "All right, let's run through the walk one more time," Lily instructed, pulling out her phone to record. "Remember, you're not just wearing the dress, you're owning it." Zara took a deep breath and began to walk across the small boutique, carefully focusing on the posture lessons they had diligently practiced. Shoulders back, chin up, small, confident steps that allowed the silk dress to flow around her legs like liquid. She had devoted hours the night before to practicing in her apartment, mastering the art of moving gracefully in the heels and the elegant dress. "Perfect!" Lily clapped her hands enthusiastically. "Now, let's review the conversation topics we discussed." They had dedicated Tuesday evening to researching the charity being honored at the gala, current events that might arise in conversation, and the fundamental principles of etiquette for formal events. Zara had always been well-read and intelligent, but she wanted to be thoroughly prepared for any subject that might be broached. The Henderson Foundation focuses on education initiatives for underprivileged children, Zara recited. They've provided funding for over 200 schools in low-income areas and awarded scholarships to thousands of deserving students. "Good," Lily affirmed. "And if someone inquires about your background, I'm pursuing my MBA in business administration while simultaneously working in the corporate sector. I'm deeply passionate about educational equity and social justice initiatives." It was all truthful, even if it didn't represent the entire picture. Lily nodded approvingly. "You don't have to fabricate stories about who you are, but you're also not obligated to share your complete life history with them either. Allow them to make their own assumptions and simply be yourself, intelligent, articulate, and confident." The jewelry had presented the final challenge. Lily had borrowed pieces from a friend who was employed at a high-end jewelry store. Elegant diamond earrings and a delicate necklace that caught the light beautifully without being ostentatious. "Remember, less is more when it comes to accessories," Lily had emphasized. "You want to project an image of wealth, not appear as though you're desperately trying to convey wealth." On Wednesday, they had addressed the practical aspects of the evening. Zara had purchased a small clutch purse that complemented her shoes perfectly and practiced the art of carrying it gracefully while walking and dancing. They had meticulously researched the venue, examined photographs from previous galas, and even watched YouTube videos about formal dining etiquette. "If you're uncertain which fork to use, simply observe what everyone else is doing," Lily had advised. "And if anyone attempts to make you feel uncomfortable, respond with overwhelming kindness. The more gracious and composed you are, the worse they will appear." Now, standing before the mirror on Friday evening, Zara felt as though she were gazing at an entirely different person. The woman reflected back at her was elegant, sophisticated, and exuded confidence. Someone who belonged in ballrooms and boardrooms alike. Someone who commanded respect and attention. Yet, beneath the carefully constructed transformation, she remained the same person who had grown up in a modest apartment with her mother, who had diligently worked her way through college, who had earned every opportunity through sheer hard work and unwavering determination. The dress and makeup were simply the costume for the role she was about to play. "I'm scared," she confessed to Lily. "What if I make a complete fool of myself? What if everyone can tell that I don't belong there?" Lily took her hands, her gaze unwavering. "Listen to me, Zara Washington. You belong anywhere you choose to be. You are intelligent, kind, hardworking and beautiful, both inside and out. Don't ever let anyone make you feel otherwise. But what if Ryan's friends are as cruel as they sounded in his office? She pressed. Then you'll handle them with the same grace and strength you've displayed in every other challenge in your life. And if they fail to recognize how truly amazing you are, that's their loss, not yours. Zara studied her reflection one last time, absorbing the full extent of the transformation. Tomorrow night, she would enter one of the most exclusive events in the city on the arm of a billionaire who had initially invited her as a joke. She would be surrounded by individuals who possessed more money than she could even fathom, wearing clothing that cost more than her annual salary. But she wouldn't be attending as Ryan Mitchell's amusing assistant. She would be attending as herself, a woman who had earned her place in the world through her intelligence, her unwavering hard work, and her unyielding determination. A woman who refused to be anyone's entertainment or the punchline of a joke. "I'm ready," she declared, her voice stronger than she felt. "You're more than ready," Lily affirmed. "You're going to show them exactly what they've been missing." As they meticulously packed the dress and accessories for the following evening's event, Zara experienced a mixture of excitement and trepidation. She had no idea what the evening would hold, but she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She would face it with dignity, grace, and the unshakable conviction that she was worthy of respect. The joke, it seemed, was about to be on Ryan Mitchell and his friends, because they had seriously underestimated Zara Washington. The black limousine pulled up to the grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel at precisely 7:30 p.m., 15 minutes after the scheduled arrival time. Zara had learned from her research that arriving fashionably late was a carefully cultivated art form among the wealthy, and she intended to make an entrance that would be indelibly etched in their memories. Inside the car, she took one final glance at herself in the small mirror, her hands surprisingly steady despite the butterflies fluttering in her stomach. The emerald green dress looked even more stunning in the evening light, and her hair and makeup had remained flawless throughout the ride from Brooklyn. "You got this, girl," she whispered to herself, repeating the affirmation Lily had drilled into her. "You belong here." The driver opened her door, and Zara stepped out onto the red carpet that led to the hotel entrance. The cool evening air felt invigorating against her skin, and she paused for a moment to appreciate the grandeur of the scene unfolding before her. Photographers lined the walkway, capturing images of the wealthy and famous as they arrived for the charity gala. She had anticipated feeling intimidated by the spectacle, but instead, she experienced a strange sense of calm. All the meticulous preparation had been worth it. She looked and felt like she belonged in this world, at least for tonight. The doorman, resplendent in his formal uniform, opened the heavy glass doors for her with a respectful nod. "Good evening, Mississippi. Welcome to the plaza." "Thank you," Zara replied with a gracious smile, her voice projecting the confidence she had been diligently practicing. The lobby was a breathtaking vision of marble and crystal, filled with elegantly dressed individuals holding champagne glasses and engaged in animated conversation. Zara recognized several faces from magazines and television. Actors, politicians, and prominent business leaders all mingling together in the exclusive atmosphere. She made her way to the ballroom entrance where a reception line had formed. A woman with a clipboard and a headset was checking names against a guest list. "Good evening. I'm here with the Mitchell party," Zara stated smoothly. The woman scanned her list and smiled warmly. "Of course, Miss Washington. Mr. Mitchell is already inside. Please go right in." Zara thanked her and took a deep breath before stepping through the ornate doors into the ballroom. The sight that greeted her was nothing short of breathtaking. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm, inviting light over hundreds of guests, while an orchestra played softly in one corner. The walls were draped in elegant fabric, and centerpieces of white roses and gold accents adorned every table. But it wasn't the opulent decorations that caused her to pause. It was the sudden hush that fell over the nearest section of the room as she entered. Conversations ceased mid-sentence. Heads turned, and eyes widened with surprise and admiration. For a moment, Zara felt as though she were moving in slow motion as she walked deeper into the ballroom, her heels clicking softly against the marble floor. She spotted Ryan almost immediately, He was standing near the bar with his usual group of friends, impeccably dressed in a perfectly tailored black tuxedo that accentuated his tall frame and broad shoulders. His dark hair was styled immaculately, and even from across the room, she could discern those piercing blue eyes that had regarded her with such cold calculation just 3 days prior. But now those same eyes were wide with shock. Ryan's champagne glass froze halfway to his lips as he stared at her. His mouth actually fell open slightly, and Zara had to suppress a smile of satisfaction. Brandon, Tyler, and Chelsea were equally stunned, their faces reflecting a mixture of disbelief and something that looked suspiciously like panic. Zara began walking toward them, her movements graceful and confident. She had practiced this walk 100 times in her apartment, but now, with all eyes focused on her, it felt natural and effortless. The emerald silk flowed around her legs like liquid poetry, and the soft lighting seemed to imbue her skin with an inner radiance. "My God, who is that?" she heard someone whisper as she passed. "She's absolutely stunning," came another voice. "I've never seen her at one of these events before." More heads turned as she continued across the room. Men straightened their ties and smoothed their hair, while women studied her dress and jewelry with expressions ranging from curiosity to envy. Zara kept her chin up and her shoulders back, channeling every lesson Lily had instilled in her regarding confidence and poise. She was approximately 20 feet away from Ryan's group when she observed Chelsea grab his arm and whisper urgently in his ear. Whatever she said seemed to jolt Ryan out of his trance, and he quickly set down his champagne glass before striding toward Zara. They met in the center of the ballroom, surrounded by curious onlookers, yet speaking in voices only they could hear. "Zara." Ryan's voice was barely above a whisper, as if he couldn't quite believe what he was seeing. "Is that really you?" "Good evening, Ryan," she replied, her tone polite but distant. "Thank you for inviting me tonight. This is quite an impressive event." He stood there for another moment, simply staring at her. Up close, she could discern the confusion, and something else. Was it guilt? In his expression. "You look," he began, then stopped, shaking his head. "I mean, you're absolutely beautiful. I barely recognized you." "Well, you did say it was formal," Zara replied with a slight smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I wanted to ensure I dressed appropriately for the occasion." The music transitioned to a slower waltz, and couples began moving onto the dance floor. Ryan seemed to regain his composure and extended his arm to her. "Would you care to dance?" Zara briefly considered refusing. Part of her wanted to maintain her distance and make him earn her forgiveness. But she had arrived here with a specific purpose, and that purpose necessitated her playing the role of his date for the evening. "I'd be delighted," she said, placing her hand on his arm. As they walked onto the dance floor, Zara was acutely aware of the whispers and stares that followed them. She could see Ryan's friends watching from the bar, their expressions no longer amused, but rather worried. Chelsea, in particular, looked as though she had swallowed something incredibly bitter. Ryan placed one hand on Zara's waist and took her other hand in his, drawing her into the traditional waltz position. She had watched YouTube videos to learn the basic steps, but she had never actually danced with a partner before. "Just follow my lead," Ryan said softly, seemingly sensing her nervousness. The first few steps were tentative, but Zara quickly found the rhythm. Ryan was an excellent dancer, smooth and confident, and he guided her across the floor with ease. After a few moments, she began to relax and genuinely enjoy the experience. "You dance beautifully," he said, his voice warmer than she had anticipated. "Thank you. You're not bad yourself." They danced in comfortable silence for a while, moving together as though they had been partners for years. Zara found herself losing herself in the music and the moment, almost forgetting the circumstances that had brought them together. But then, she caught sight of Chelsea's furious expression and remembered exactly why she was there. "Your friends seem surprised to see me," she said, her voice carefully neutral. Ryan's jaw tightened slightly. "They're not accustomed to seeing someone as elegant as you at these events." It was a diplomatic answer, but Zara knew better. She had overheard their cruel laughter, and their bets regarding her failure. She knew they had anticipated either her not showing up at all, or her arriving looking awkward and out of place. Instead, she had entered their exclusive world looking as though she belonged there, and it had clearly thrown them off balance. "Well," she said, her smile becoming more genuine, "I'm glad I could exceed their expectations." As the song concluded, Ryan led her off the dance floor toward his group of friends. Zara braced herself for whatever cruel comments or backhanded compliments they might have prepared. But as they approached, she noticed something intriguing. Brandon, Tyler, and Chelsea all appeared genuinely nervous, as though they weren't quite sure how to navigate this unexpected turn of events. "Everyone," Ryan announced, his voice carrying a note of pride that surprised Zara. "I'd like you to properly meet Zara Washington." Brandon stepped forward first, his usual smirk replaced by a more respectful expression. "Zara, you look absolutely stunning tonight. I don't believe we've been formally introduced. I'm Brandon Hayes." "It's nice to meet you, Brandon," Zara replied graciously, shaking his extended hand. Tyler and Chelsea followed suit, both offering polite but somewhat strained greetings. Zara could see the confusion in their eyes. This wasn't the source of entertainment they had anticipated. Instead of a woman they could mock and dismiss, they were confronted with someone who clearly belonged in their world, at least for the duration of the evening. "So, Zara," Chelsea began, her voice artificially sweet, "Ryan tells us you work together. What exactly do you do?" It was a loaded question, clearly designed to expose her as merely an assistant. But Zara was prepared for it. "I work in corporate administration and business development," she replied smoothly. "It's challenging work, but I find it rewarding to contribute to building successful enterprises." It was technically truthful, and sufficiently vague to allow them to draw their own conclusions. "How interesting," Chelsea said, her smile becoming more forced. "And where did you acquire that gorgeous dress? It looks like something from Milan." Another trap, but Zara navigated it expertly. "Thank you. I'm glad you like it. I believe good style is more about how you carry yourself than about labels, don't you?" Before Chelsea could respond, a distinguished older gentleman approached their group. Zara recognized him from her research as Senator Hamilton, one of the most influential politicians in the state. "Ryan, good to see you," the senator said, shaking his hand. "And who is this lovely young woman?" "Senator Hamilton, I'd like you to meet Zara Washington," Ryan said. "Zara, this is Senator Hamilton, one of the sponsors of tonight's event." "It's an honor to meet you, Senator," Zara said, offering her hand. "I've followed your work on education reform with great interest." The senator's eyebrows rose with surprise and pleasure. "You're familiar with my education initiatives?" "Of course. Your bill to increase funding for early childhood education programs in low-income areas is precisely the type of forward-thinking policy we need. The research clearly demonstrates that investment in early education yields the highest return in terms of reducing inequality and improving economic outcomes." Zara had done her homework, and it showed. The senator's face lit up with genuine enthusiasm as he launched into a detailed discussion of his legislative priorities. Within minutes, they were engaged in a sophisticated conversation about policy and social justice that left Ryan's friends standing awkwardly on the sidelines. As the evening progressed, Zara found herself moving through the room with increasing confidence. She spoke knowledgeably with business leaders about market trends, discussed art with collectors, and charmed politicians with her insights into social issues. Every conversation reinforced the image she had meticulously cultivated, that of an intelligent, articulate woman who belonged in these circles. Ryan remained by her side throughout the evening, and she began to notice a shift in his demeanor. The arrogant smirk had vanished, replaced by something that resembled genuine admiration. He watched her navigate each social interaction with growing respect, and when he introduced her to other guests, there was a discernible pride in his voice. But the true test came when dinner was announced, and they took their seats at one of the premium tables near the front of the ballroom. Zara found herself seated between Ryan and a prominent venture capitalist, facing directly across from Chelsea, who had clearly maneuvered to secure the seat from which she could observe Zara's every move. As the first course was served, Zara silently thanked Lily for all those etiquette lessons. She knew precisely which fork to use, how to engage in polite conversation while eating, and how to navigate the formal dining experience with grace. But she also recognized that the real challenge was only just beginning. Dinner conversations at events such as this could be treacherous, rife with subtle social tests and opportunities for embarrassment. Chelsea was clearly plotting something, and Zara could discern the calculation in her eyes as she prepared to make her move. The game, it seemed, was far from over. As the salad course was served, Chelsea leaned forward with that artificial smile that Zara was beginning to recognize as a warning sign. "So, Zara," Chelsea said, her voice carrying just loud enough for the entire table to hear, "Ryan mentioned that you're quite the reader. What books have you been enjoying lately?" It seemed like an innocent question, but Zara could sense the trap. Chelsea was likely expecting her to mention popular romance novels or bestsellers, something that would categorize her as unsophisticated compared to the literary preferences of the wealthy elite. "I just finished rereading The Souls of Black Folk by W.E.B. Du Bois," Zara replied thoughtfully. "His analysis of double consciousness feels particularly relevant to current discussions about identity and belonging in professional spaces. I'm also working through Piketty's research on economic inequality, though I find his conclusions about capital concentration a bit pessimistic." The venture capitalist seated beside her, David Morrison, nearly choked on his wine. "You're familiar with Piketty's work? Most people find his economic theory rather dense. It is complex, but the implications are fascinating," Zara said, turning to engage him in conversation. "His data on wealth concentration over the past century raises important questions about social mobility and the sustainability of current economic models." Within minutes, she was engaged in a sophisticated discussion with David and two other business leaders at the table about economic policy, social responsibility, and the role of private enterprise in addressing inequality. Her responses were thoughtful and well-informed, drawing on everything from classical economic theory to current research. Ryan listened with growing amazement. In the 2 years they had worked together, he had never heard Zara speak with such passion and intelligence about subjects beyond their immediate work responsibilities. He was witnessing a completely different side of her, and it was captivating. Chelsea's plan had backfired spectacularly. Instead of exposing Zara as out of her depth, the conversation had established her as one of the most interesting people at the table. "Zara, you should meet my daughter," said Patricia Whitman, the wife of a prominent banker. "She's studying social policy at Harvard, and I think you two would have fascinating conversations." "I'd love that," Zara replied warmly. "What's her focus area?" As the conversation continued, Ryan found himself studying Zara's profile as she spoke. The elegant curve of her neck, the way her eyes lit up when she discussed something she was passionate about, the graceful gestures she made with her hands, everything about her seemed to radiate in the soft ballroom lighting. He realized with a jolt that he was attracted to her, not just physically, although she looked absolutely stunning tonight, but intellectually and emotionally as well. She was brilliant, compassionate, and possessed a genuine quality that was rare within his social circle. The realization disturbed him. This was supposed to be a joke, an evening of entertainment at her expense, but nothing about this evening was unfolding according to his initial plan. "Ryan." Zara's voice brought him back to the present. "Patricia was asking about your foundation's education initiatives." "Oh yes," Ryan said, attempting to refocus on the conversation. "We've been working with several schools in underprivileged areas, providing technology and funding for STEM programs." "That's wonderful," Zara said, and her smile seemed genuinely pleased. Educational technology can be such a powerful equalizer when implemented thoughtfully. The main course arrived, and the conversation shifted to lighter topics. But Ryan noticed that other people at nearby tables kept glancing over at Zara, clearly intrigued by the beautiful, articulate woman they had never encountered at these events. Several men had approached during cocktails to introduce themselves, and Ryan had felt an unexpected surge of possessiveness. He found himself staying closer to her side, his hand resting on her back as they moved through the crowd, subtly signaling that she was with him. "You're full of surprises tonight," he said quietly during a lull in the conversation. Am I? Zara asked, her tone carefully neutral. I had no idea you were so well-read, so passionate about social issues. In all the time we've worked together, you've never mentioned any of this. Zara turned. She looked at him directly, her dark eyes steady and unreadable. You never asked. The simple statement landed with the force of a physical blow. She was right, of course. In the 2 years they'd worked together, he hadn't once inquired about her interests, her goals, or her thoughts on anything beyond their immediate work tasks. He treated her like a highly efficient machine, not a person with her own mind and dreams. I'm sorry, he said quietly. You're right. I should have. Excuse me, folks. The evening's master of ceremonies took the stage, interrupting their conversation. If I could have your attention, please. It's time for our charity auction, and we have some truly spectacular items up for bid tonight. The auction was typically one of the highlights of these events, where wealthy attendees competed to donate large sums of money for prestigious items and experiences. Ryan usually enjoyed the competition, the way bidding wars could escalate into six-figure donations for charity. But tonight, he found himself more interested in watching Zara's reactions to the proceedings. Her eyes widened in amazement when a weekend at a private island resort sold for $50,000. She looked genuinely moved when a young scholarship recipient took the stage to speak about how the Henderson Foundation had changed her life. That could have been me, Zara whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Without programs like this, I never would have been able to afford college. Ryan looked at her with new understanding. The passion she had shown earlier when discussing education policy wasn't just some academic exercise. It was deeply personal. She had lived the experiences they were raising money to address. The next item up for auction was a private cooking class with a celebrity chef, and the bidding quickly escalated. Ryan noticed several men at nearby tables glancing at Zara before raising their paddles, and he realized they were hoping to impress her with their generous donations. The thought of other men trying to win her attention triggered something competitive within Ryan. When the bidding reached $20,000, he raised his paddle. He called out. Zara looked at him, surprised. Ryan, you don't have to, came a voice from across the room. Ryan looked over to see Marcus Webb, a real estate developer who had been eyeing Zara all evening. Ryan countered, his voice carrying a note of challenge. The room was beginning to take notice of the bidding war. Zara placed her hand on Ryan's arm. This is too much. It's just a cooking class. But Ryan was no longer thinking about the cooking class. He was thinking about the way Marcus had looked at Zara when they were introduced, the way he had lingered just a bit too long when shaking her hand. Marcus called out with a confident smile. Ryan raised his paddle again. A murmur went through the crowd. This was becoming one of the largest single donations of the evening, and everyone was watching to see how high it would go. Marcus hesitated for a moment, then shook his head with a rueful smile. Congratulations, Ryan. That's quite a generous donation. The auctioneer brought down his gavel. Sold to Mr. Mitchell for $75,000. The applause was enthusiastic, and Ryan felt a surge of satisfaction. But when he looked at Zara, her expression was unreadable. That was very generous of you, she said quietly. It's for a good cause, he replied, though they both knew his motivation had been more personal than charitable. As the auction continued, Ryan found himself studying Zara's profile again. The evening had been full of revelations, each one making him see her in a completely different light. She wasn't just his efficient assistant. She was a brilliant, passionate, beautiful woman who had somehow been invisible to him for 2 years. But there was something else bothering him, something that had been growing stronger throughout the evening. It was the memory of the conversation in his office, of the cruel laughter and the betting pool his friends had started. It was the knowledge that this entire evening had begun as a joke designed to humiliate her. And judging by the way she had handled every challenge with grace and intelligence, he was beginning to suspect that she knew exactly what his original intentions had been. The question was, what was she planning to do about it? As the auction concluded and the orchestra resumed playing, couples began returning to the dance floor. The evening was reaching its peak, with champagne flowing and animated conversations filling the elegant ballroom. But Ryan found himself growing increasingly uncomfortable with the weight of his guilty conscience. "Would you like to get some air?" he asked Zara quietly. "There's a terrace overlooking the park." She nodded, and he led her through the French doors onto a stone balcony decorated with twinkling lights and flowering plants. The night air was cool and refreshing after the warmth of the crowded ballroom, and the sounds of the city provided a gentle backdrop to their conversation. "It's beautiful up here," Zara said, moving to the railing and looking out over Central Park. The moonlight caught the silk of her dress and made her skin glow with an ethereal radiance. "Zara, I need to tell you something," Ryan began, then stopped, unsure how to continue. She turned to face him, her expression patient but guarded. "What is it?" "About the invitation to tonight." He ran a hand through his hair, disturbing its perfect styling. "My reasons for asking you weren't entirely honorable." "I know," she said simply. The words hit him like a punch to the gut. "I know. I heard you and your friends talking in your office on Tuesday. I was bringing you the quarterly reports when I overheard your conversation about the entertainment I would provide tonight." Ryan felt the blood drain from his face. "Zara, I'm so sorry. I was being cruel and thoughtless, and you didn't deserve that." "No, I didn't," she agreed, her voice steady, but not unkind. "The question is, why did you go through with it? And why did you spend $75,000 on a cooking class you don't need?" He was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the park while he gathered his thoughts. "Honestly, at first it was just supposed to be a joke. My friends were teasing me about not having a date, and inviting you seemed like harmless fun." "Harmless to whom?" "You're right. It was cruel and stupid." He turned to face her directly. "But tonight, watching you, talking with you, seeing how brilliant and amazing you are, I realized I've been an idiot for 2 years. I've worked with you every day and never really saw you. Not the real you." Zara studied his face in the moonlight as if trying to determine whether his words were sincere. "And what do you see now?" "I see someone who's smarter than half the people in that ballroom. Someone who's worked incredibly hard to get where she is. Someone who handles challenges with grace and dignity that I couldn't manage on my best day." He paused, then added quietly, "I see someone I'd like to know better, if you'll let me." "Ryan," she said gently, "I appreciate the apology, but you have to understand. This isn't real. This dress, this jewelry, this whole evening. It's a performance. Tomorrow I go back to being your assistant, and you go back to being the boss who sees me as part of the furniture. It doesn't have to be that way, does it?" She moved closer to the railing, her voice becoming more passionate. "Do you know what I did to afford this dress? I spent my entire emergency fund, money I've been saving for 3 years in case my mother's medical bills got worse. I borrowed jewelry from a friend's friend and spent 2 days learning to walk in these shoes." Ryan felt a stab of guilt at her words. "I didn't know about your mother. Is she ill?" "She's been fighting cancer for 8 months. She's a nurse, has been her whole life, taking care of other people. Now she's the one who needs taking care of, and I'm doing my best to help while working full-time and trying to finish my MBA." The revelation hit Ryan like a punch to the gut. While he had been playing cruel jokes with his wealthy friends, Zara had been dealing with real problems, real challenges that his money and privilege had never forced him to face. "Why didn't you tell me? I could have helped, arranged for better doctors, covered the medical expenses." "Because that's not your responsibility," she said firmly. "And because I've learned that accepting help from employers can be complicated. What happens when you decide I'm not worth helping anymore? What happens when your generosity comes with strings attached?" Her words stung because they contained an uncomfortable truth. How many times had he used his wealth and influence to control situations and people? How many of his relationships were built on unequal power dynamics? "It wouldn't be like that," he said, though even as he spoke, he wasn't entirely sure he could promise that. "Maybe not. But can you understand why I might be cautious?" They stood in comfortable silence for a few minutes, the sounds of the party drifting through the open doors behind them. Ryan found himself really looking at Zara for perhaps the first time, seeing past the elegant exterior to the strength and vulnerability underneath. "Can I ask you something?" he said finally. Of course. Why did you come tonight? After hearing what you heard, why didn't you just tell me you were sick or make some other excuse? Zara was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing patterns on the stone railing. Because I was tired of being invisible, tired of being treated like I didn't matter. And maybe I wanted to prove to myself that I could belong in a world like this, even if it was just for one night. You more than belong here, Ryan said earnestly. You've been the most interesting person at this entire event. She turned to look at him, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Is that your professional opinion, Mr. Mitchell? That's my personal opinion, Zara, and I'd like to get to know the person behind the professional facade. If you're willing. Before she could respond, the sound of someone clearing their throat interrupted them. They turned to see Chelsea standing in the doorway to the terrace, her expression tight with barely controlled anger. Sorry to interrupt, Chelsea said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. But they're about to announce the final charity totals, and I thought you might want to be inside for that, Ryan. We'll be right in, Ryan replied, clearly annoyed by the interruption. But Chelsea didn't leave. Instead, she stepped onto the terrace and fixed Zara with a calculating stare. You know, Zara, I have to say, you've been quite the surprise tonight. When Ryan first told us about you, we expected. She paused dramatically, letting the implications hang in the air. What did you expect, Chelsea? Zara asked, her voice calm but with an edge of steel. Well, someone more appropriate to her station. But you certainly cleaned up nicely. Though I do have to wonder, is this the real you or just a very good performance? The insult was delivered with a smile, but its intent was clear. Ryan started to step forward, but Zara placed a gentle hand on his arm, stopping him. I think the real question, Zara said, her voice gracious but firm, is whether authenticity is about the clothes you wear or the way you treat other people. Don't you agree? The response was perfect, polite enough to be socially acceptable, but pointed enough to make Chelsea's cruelty obvious to anyone listening. Chelsea's smile faltered slightly, and she seemed to realize she had been outmaneuvered. How philosophical, Chelsea said weakly. Shall we go back inside? Zara suggested, linking her arm through Ryan's. I'd hate to miss the charity announcements. As they walked back into the ballroom, Ryan felt a surge of admiration for the way Zara had handled Chelsea's attack. She had been classy, intelligent, and subtly devastating all at once. But he also felt a growing sense of protectiveness toward her. His friends had invited her into their world only to try to tear her down, and he was beginning to realize that he wouldn't let that happen. The evening was far from over, and he suspected the real challenges were yet to come. The announcement of the charity totals brought enthusiastic applause, with the evening having raised over $2 million for the Henderson Foundation. As the master of ceremonies thanked the generous donors, Ryan and Zara made their way back to their table, where his friends were waiting with expressions that ranged from confused to openly hostile. Well, Brandon said as they approached, his voice carrying a note of forced joviality. The golden couple returns. You two certainly made an impression on the terrace. We were just getting some air, Ryan replied, his tone warning Brandon to be careful. Of course you were, Tyler added with a smirk. Though, from what Chelsea tells us, it looked quite romantic out there. Zara maintained her composure, but Ryan could see the tension in her shoulders. The evening had been going so well, and now his friends were determined to create drama. Actually, came a familiar voice from behind them. I think they look perfect together. Everyone turned to see a stunning blonde woman in a silver gown approaching their table. Ryan's face went pale as he recognized his ex-girlfriend, Vanessa Sterling, the daughter of a prominent media family and someone he hadn't seen in over 6 months. Vanessa, he said, his voice carefully neutral. I didn't know you were going to be here tonight. Last-minute decision, she replied with a dazzling smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Daddy thought it would be good for me to be seen supporting worthy causes. Her gaze shifted to Zara, studying her with obvious curiosity. And you must be Ryan's mysterious date. I'm Vanessa Sterling. Zara Washington, Zara replied politely, extending her hand. It's nice to meet you. Likewise, I'm sure. Vanessa's handshake lingered just a moment too long, her eyes never leaving Zara's face. You know, Ryan and I dated for almost 2 years. I thought I knew all of his friends, but I don't remember ever meeting you. The comment was designed to probe, to establish Vanessa's prior claim, and put Zara on the defensive. But Zara handled it with the same grace she had shown all evening. Ryan and I know each other through work, she said simply. Sometimes the best relationships develop from shared professional respect. It was a perfect response, honest but vague, and it subtly suggested that their connection was based on something deeper than mere social acquaintance. Vanessa's eyes narrowed slightly. She had expected to fluster this unknown woman, but Zara's poise was clearly throwing her off balance. How lovely, Vanessa said, her tone becoming more pointed. And what kind of work do you do, Zara? Are you in finance like Ryan? Or perhaps fashion? You certainly have exquisite taste. Another probe, this one designed to expose Zara's background and make her feel self-conscious about her social status. Ryan started to intervene, but Zara spoke first. I work in corporate development and strategic planning, she replied smoothly. It's challenging work, but I find it rewarding to help build sustainable business models that create value for all stakeholders. Again, technically true and impressively vague. Vanessa was clearly growing frustrated with her inability to pin Zara down or make her uncomfortable. How fascinating, Vanessa said, her smile becoming more forced. You know, Ryan, you never mentioned working with someone so accomplished. The pause before accomplished was deliberate, designed to suggest that she didn't quite believe Zara's credentials. But before Ryan could respond, the orchestra began playing again, and couples started moving back onto the dance floor. Vanessa, said a distinguished older man approaching their group. There you are. I've been looking everywhere for you. Oh, hello, Senator Richardson, Vanessa replied, her demeanor instantly shifting to charm a potential political connection. How wonderful to see you again. The senator, however, barely glanced at Vanessa. His attention was focused entirely on Zara. Ms. Washington, I wanted to thank you for that insightful conversation earlier about education policy. Your perspective on implementation challenges was particularly valuable. I'd love to continue that discussion sometime. Perhaps you'd consider joining our advisory committee on education reform. The invitation was clearly genuine and prestigious. Advisory positions on senatorial committees were highly sought after, typically reserved for experts with significant credentials and influence. Zara looked genuinely surprised and pleased. That's very kind of you, Senator. I'd be honored to contribute to such important work. Excellent. I'll have my staff contact you to set up a meeting. He turned to Ryan. You're fortunate to have such a brilliant colleague, Mitchell. Hold on to this one. As the senator walked away, Vanessa's expression had shifted from smug confidence to something approaching panic. This unknown woman wasn't just holding her own in their social circle. She was actively impressing people who mattered. Well, Vanessa said, her voice tight, you certainly make quite an impression on the senator, though I suppose politicians are always looking for diverse perspectives. The comment was calculated to sting with its implications about diversity hiring and tokenism, but it also revealed Vanessa's desperation and poor judgment. Ryan's jaw tightened with anger. Vanessa, I think. It's all right, Ryan, Zara interrupted gently, her hand touching his arm. She turned to face Vanessa directly, her expression calm, but her eyes flashing with quiet fire. You know, Vanessa, you're absolutely right about politicians valuing diverse perspectives. In my experience, the most successful leaders surround themselves with people who bring different backgrounds, experiences, and ways of thinking to complex problems. It's one of the reasons democracy works so well. It assumes that wisdom can come from unexpected places. The response was brilliant. It acknowledged Vanessa's insult while reframing it as a compliment. And it did so with such intellectual sophistication that it made Vanessa look small and petty by comparison. Chelsea, who had been watching this exchange with growing alarm, decided to jump in. Oh, how wonderfully said. Though, of course, there's something to be said for traditional qualifications and established social connections. Some circles require a certain breeding, don't you think? The word breeding hung in the air like a slap. It was a direct attack on Zara's background, designed to make her feel like an outsider who didn't belong. But if Chelsea and Vanessa expected Zara to crumble under their combined assault, they were badly mistaken. "I couldn't agree more about the importance of good breeding," Zara replied with a serene smile. "After all, true breeding is about character, kindness, and how we treat others, especially those who can't do anything for us. My grandmother always said that real class is measured by how gracious we are to people, regardless of their circumstances." The comeback was devastating in its elegance. Without raising her voice or being directly rude, Zara had essentially called both women classless while positioning herself as the more refined person in the conversation. Ryan felt a surge of admiration and something stronger: pride. This brilliant, graceful woman was with him tonight, and she was handling his shallow, cruel friends with more dignity than they deserved. But he could also see that the attacks were taking a toll on her. Despite her composed exterior, he could sense the tension in her posture, the slight tightness around her eyes that suggested she was fighting to maintain her calm. "Actually," he said, his voice cutting through the tension, "I think this would be a perfect time for another dance." "Zara," she took his offered arm gratefully. "I'd love to." As they walked away from the table, Ryan could hear Vanessa's voice rising in agitation behind them. "I can't believe he brought his secretary to this event. Does he have any idea how this looks?" "Keep your voice down," Chelsea hissed. "People are staring." On the dance floor, Ryan pulled Zara into his arms, holding her a little closer than was strictly proper for a waltz. "I'm sorry about them," he said quietly. "They're being horrible and you don't deserve any of it." "I can handle it," Zara replied, though he could hear the strain in her voice. "You shouldn't have to. The things they're saying, the way they're treating you, it's inexcusable." They danced in silence for a few moments, the music providing a peaceful refuge from the social battlefield they had just left. But Ryan could feel the tension in Zara's body, see the slight tremor in her hands despite her outward composure. "Why are you defending me?" she asked quietly, looking up into his eyes. The question caught him off guard. "What do you mean? Earlier, when Chelsea was being cruel, and just now with Vanessa, you could have just let them say what they wanted and stayed out of it. It would have been easier for you." Ryan considered her question seriously. "Because it's the right thing to do. And because—" he paused, searching for the right words. "Because you matter to me more than I realized until tonight." Zara studied his face intently, as if trying to determine whether his words were genuine or just another performance for the elegant crowd around them. "Ryan, I need you to understand something," she said finally. "Whatever this is between us tonight, whatever you think you're feeling, it's complicated. Tomorrow we go back to our regular lives, where you're the billionaire CEO and I'm the assistant who brings you coffee and manages your schedule. It doesn't have to be that way, does it? Look around this room. Look at your friends, your ex-girlfriend, the world you live in. I had to spend my life savings just to look like I belong here for one night. This isn't my real life, Ryan. This is borrowed glamour that has to be returned in the morning." Her words stung because they contained a truth he wasn't ready to face. The gulf between their worlds was real, and it wouldn't disappear just because he was beginning to see her as more than an employee. "What if I want to bridge that gap?" he asked. "What if you get bored with the novelty? What if your friends convince you that I'm not worth the social complications? What if you decide that mixing business with pleasure was a mistake?" Before he could answer, the music stopped, and they were interrupted by the approach of Marcus Webb, the real estate developer who had been watching Zara throughout the evening. "Excuse me," Marcus said with a confident smile, "but I was hoping I might steal the lady for a dance." Ryan felt an immediate surge of possessiveness, but Zara placed a gentle hand on his arm. "That's very kind of you, Mr. Webb, but I was just telling Ryan that I needed to freshen up. Perhaps later." It was a polite but clear dismissal, and Marcus had no choice but to accept it gracefully. "Of course. I hope we'll have a chance to talk more before the evening ends." As Marcus walked away, Zara turned back to Ryan. "I really do need a few minutes to myself. This evening has been intense. Of course, I'll be waiting right here." Zara made her way toward the ladies' room, moving gracefully through the crowd despite the emotional turmoil she was feeling. The evening had been a roller coaster of emotions. Triumph at 1:04:46 a.m., proving she could hold her own in this world. Hurt at the cruel comments from Ryan's friends, and confusion about the growing connection she felt with Ryan himself. In the elegantly appointed lounge, she touched up her lipstick and took a few deep breaths, trying to center herself for whatever the rest of the evening might bring. Well, if it isn't the star of the evening. Zara turned to see Vanessa standing behind her, having followed her into the lounge. Without the crowd around them, Vanessa's mask of social politeness had completely dropped. "Vanessa," Zara said calmly, "I thought you were enjoying the party." "Oh, I am. Especially watching you play dress-up with people who will never truly accept you." Vanessa moved closer, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "Do you really think this little performance of yours is going to last? That Ryan is actually interested in someone like you?" She paused, letting the words hang in the air. "Someone like me? Come on, we both know what this is. You're his charity case, his way of feeling good about himself by helping the poor little assistant. But once the novelty wears off, once his friends make it clear how embarrassing this all is, he'll drop you faster than yesterday's news." Zara felt each word like a physical blow, not because they were necessarily true, but because they echoed her own deepest fears, the anxieties she tried so hard to suppress. "You don't know what you're talking about," she said quietly, her voice barely audible. "Don't I? I know Ryan better than anyone. I know how he thinks, what he wants, what his world expects from him. And trust me, it's not someone who shops at discount stores and lives in Brooklyn." Vanessa's eyes narrowed. "Is that what this is about? You're jealous because he's moved on." Vanessa's laugh was sharp and bitter, a cruel sound that echoed in the small space. "Jealous of you? Please, this isn't about jealousy. It's about reality. Ryan and I have history. We have a connection that goes back years. We understand each other's worlds, each other's expectations. You're just a temporary distraction, a passing fancy." Zara tried to maintain her composure. "If that's true, then you have nothing to worry about." "Maybe not," Vanessa conceded, her voice softening slightly, though the venom still lingered beneath the surface. "But I hate seeing someone get hurt unnecessarily. And make no mistake, you will get hurt. Ryan's world doesn't have room for people like you, no matter how pretty you clean up." With that final cruelty, Vanessa swept out of the lounge, leaving Zara alone with her racing thoughts and aching heart. Standing in front of the mirror, Zara looked at her reflection one more time. The woman staring back still looked elegant and sophisticated, but now she could see past the surface to the uncertainty underneath, the fear that Vanessa had so skillfully exploited. Was Vanessa right? Was she just a temporary novelty, a way for Ryan to feel progressive and charitable? The connection she thought she felt between them, was it real? Or was she just projecting her own hopes onto a situation that was doomed from the start? She thought about her mother fighting cancer in a hospital bed, about the emergency fund she had spent on this dress, about the life she would return to tomorrow regardless of what happened tonight. But she also thought about the conversation she had shared with Ryan on the terrace, under the starlit sky. The way he had looked at her when she was speaking with passion about things that mattered to her, the genuine interest in his eyes. The protectiveness he had shown when his friends were being cruel, shielding her from their barbs. Maybe Vanessa was wrong. Maybe there was something real happening between them, a genuine spark that transcended their different backgrounds. Or maybe she was just setting herself up for the kind of heartbreak that would make tonight's humiliation seem like minor inconveniences, insignificant bumps in the road. Taking one last deep breath, Zara straightened her shoulders and prepared to return to the ballroom. Whatever happened next, she would face it with dignity. She had come too far tonight to give up now, to let Vanessa's words define her. When Zara returned to the ballroom, she found Ryan waiting for her near the entrance, his expression anxious until he saw her approaching. "There you are," he said, relief evident in his voice, his shoulders visibly relaxing. "I was starting to worry." "I'm fine," she replied, though he could see something had changed. There was a guardedness in her eyes that hadn't been there before, a subtle shift in her demeanor. "Did something happen?" he asked, his brow furrowed with concern. "You look upset." Before Zara could answer, they were interrupted by the approach of the entire group. Brandon, Tyler, Chelsea, and Vanessa, all moving toward them with expressions of barely concealed anticipation, their eyes gleaming with mischief. "Ryan, darling," Vanessa said, her voice artificially bright and saccharine. "We were just discussing the most amusing thing. Chelsea was telling us about some bet you all made about tonight's entertainment," Brandon said, carefully choosing the word, a smirk playing on his lips. Ryan's blood ran cold. He looked at Chelsea, who was smiling with malicious satisfaction, her eyes fixed on Zara. "I thought Zara might be interested to hear about your little wager," Chelsea continued, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "About whether she would show up tonight, how she would look, whether she would embarrass herself." "Chelsea, stop," Ryan said, his voice sharp with warning, his jaw clenched. But Chelsea was beyond caring about his warnings. The evening hadn't gone as planned, and she was determined to salvage something from the wreckage, to inflict as much damage as possible. "Oh, but it gets better," she continued, her eyes gleaming with cruelty, relishing Zara's discomfort. "Should we tell her about the betting pool? About how you all put money on whether she would make it through the evening without humiliating herself?" The words hit the gathered crowd like a bomb. Conversations around them stopped as people turned to listen to the drama unfolding, their faces a mixture of shock and morbid curiosity. Zara's face went pale, but her expression remained composed, a mask of icy control. "I see," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper, but carrying a chilling weight. "Zara, let me explain," Ryan started, his voice laced with desperation, reaching out to her. But she held up a hand to stop him, her eyes unwavering. "No need for explanations," she said, her voice steady despite the pain Ryan could see in her eyes. "Everything is quite clear now." "Actually," Brandon said, apparently deciding to join the attack, emboldened by the captive audience and the unfolding spectacle. "I think you handled yourself quite well tonight. Better than we expected. Certainly, though, I suppose anyone can play a part for one evening, put on a convincing act." "Brandon, shut up," Ryan snapped, his anger finally boiling over, his patience exhausted. But Tyler decided to pile on, eager to contribute to the humiliation. "Oh, come on, Ryan. We all know this was just a joke. A very successful joke, I might add. She actually fooled quite a few people into thinking she belonged here, that she was one of us." The cruelty was breathtaking in its casual viciousness. These people who had everything handed to them by virtue of their birth, who had never known hardship or struggle, were taking pleasure in tearing down someone who had worked for everything she had achieved, someone who had defied their expectations and exposed their own shallow insecurities. Ryan felt something snap inside him. All the anger he had been building toward his so-called friends, all the self-disgust at his own role in this cruelty, all the protective instincts he felt towards Zara, it all came together in a moment of perfect clarity, a surge of righteous indignation. "You want to know the truth?" he said, his voice carrying across the nearby section of the ballroom, silencing the murmurs and drawing even more attention. "You're right. This started as a cruel joke. I invited Zara tonight because you all thought it would be funny to watch her struggle in a world where she didn't belong, to witness her discomfort and revel in your own perceived superiority." Gasps came from the surrounding crowd, a collective intake of breath at his unexpected confession. Several people had pulled out their phones and were recording the confrontation, eager to capture the unfolding drama for posterity. "But here's what actually happened," Ryan continued, his voice growing stronger, fueled by righteous anger and a growing sense of shame. "Zara didn't just belong here tonight. She was the most impressive person in this entire room. While you were all playing your petty social games and trying to tear her down, she was having intelligent conversations with senators, charming business leaders, and conducting herself with more grace and dignity than any of you have ever shown." "Ryan," Vanessa tried to interrupt, her voice laced with panic, realizing the damage he was inflicting on himself and their social circle. But he wasn't finished, his gaze fixed on Zara, his voice ringing with conviction. She has a master's degree in business that she earned while working full-time, juggling countless responsibilities and overcoming every obstacle in her path. She's been supporting her mother through cancer treatments while managing my schedule and running my professional life with more efficiency than I could have imagined possible. She speaks multiple languages, reads economic theory for pleasure, and has more genuine compassion in her little finger than the rest of us have combined. The crowd around them was growing larger, drawn by the drama and Ryan's passionate speech. Their faces a mixture of shock, admiration, and discomfort. And you know what the most pathetic part is? Ryan's voice was rising now, fueled by righteous anger and a profound sense of injustice. You're all so threatened by her intelligence and authenticity that you had to resort to cruel jokes and petty insults to try to make yourselves feel superior. Because deep down you know that she's earned everything she has, that she's achieved more in her short life than most of you will ever accomplish. While most of you have never had to work for anything in your lives, never faced a real challenge or overcome a genuine obstacle. That's enough, Ryan, Chelsea said, her face red with embarrassment and anger, realizing the extent of the damage he was causing. No, it's not enough. Not nearly enough, Ryan retorted, his gaze unwavering, his voice filled with conviction. Ryan turned to face the crowd that had gathered around them, his eyes sweeping across their faces. I want everyone here to know that Zara Washington is brilliant, accomplished, and deserving of respect. And if any of you have a problem with that, you can take it up with me. The silence that followed was deafening, a heavy stillness that hung in the air. Phone cameras continued to record, capturing what would undoubtedly become social media gossip for weeks to come, the scandal of the season. Ryan turned to Zara, his expression soft with regret and something that looked like love, a depth of emotion she hadn't seen before. I'm sorry, he said quietly, his voice filled with remorse. I'm sorry for the cruel joke, for my friend's behavior, for not seeing how amazing you are until tonight. You deserve so much better than this. Zara looked at him for a long moment, her eyes searching his face, trying to discern the truth beneath the surface, to gauge the sincerity of his words. Around them, the crowd waited with bated breath for her response, anticipating her reaction, eager to see what she would do. Thank you, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper, but carrying a weight of emotion that resonated through the room. That was unexpected. It was overdue, Ryan replied, his voice softening, his gaze unwavering. You're the most remarkable woman I've ever met, and I've been an idiot for not seeing it sooner. Ryan, she said softly, her voice laced with a hint of caution. This doesn't change anything. Tomorrow we still go back to our different worlds, to our separate realities. What if we don't have to? He asked, his eyes filled with hope. What if we could build something real together? Something that transcends our different backgrounds and expectations. Before she could answer, the master of ceremonies approached with several photographers and a reporter from a prominent society magazine, drawn by the commotion and the unfolding drama. Mr. Mitchell, Ms. Washington, he said with professional enthusiasm, oblivious to the undercurrents of tension. We'd love to get a photo of the evening's most talked about couple. Your donation tonight was remarkable, and we understand there's quite a romantic story here. Ryan looked at Zara questioningly, silently offering her a choice. The choice was hers. She could walk away now, disappear back into her regular life, shield herself from the scrutiny and the potential heartbreak. Or she could take a leap of faith with him, embrace the uncertainty and the possibility of something extraordinary. The decision would change everything, and they both knew it, the weight of that moment hanging heavy in the air. One photo, she said, finally taking his offered arm, a subtle gesture of acceptance. As the photographers positioned them, and the flashes began to pop, Ryan leaned down to whisper in her ear, his voice low and intimate. Whatever happens next, I want you to know that tonight changed me. You changed me. Zara looked up at him, seeing past the wealth and privilege, past the superficial trappings of his world, to the man underneath, the man who had stood up for her, the man who had recognized her worth. For the first time all evening, her smile was completely genuine, a radiant expression of hope and possibility. "We'll see," she whispered back, her voice filled with a mixture of caution and anticipation. "We'll see." The photographs would appear in magazines and social media feeds, marking the beginning of a story that would capture the city's imagination, a modern-day Cinderella tale. But for Ryan and Zara, standing together in that moment, bathed in the flash of the cameras, the real story was just beginning, a story of courage, authenticity, and the transformative power of love. 3 months later, Zara sat at her desk on the 42nd floor of Mitchell Technologies. But everything had changed. The entire landscape of her life irrevocably altered. The office was the same, the familiar space she had occupied for the past 2 years. The view of Manhattan was the same, the sprawling cityscape stretching out before her. But she was no longer just an assistant managing someone else's schedule, a faceless cog in the corporate machine. The business card on her desk read, Zara Washington, Director of Social Impact Initiatives. And the work she was doing felt more meaningful, more fulfilling, than anything she had ever imagined possible. After that night at the gala, everything had moved quickly, a whirlwind of events that had catapulted her into a new reality. The photos and video from Ryan's passionate defense had gone viral, spreading like wildfire across social media, turning their story into a modern fairy tale that captured the public's imagination, a symbol of hope and social change. But more importantly, it had forced both of them to confront their feelings, to examine their own biases and assumptions, and decide what they really wanted, what truly mattered to them. Ryan had been true to his word, living up to the promise he had made that night. Within a week of the gala, he had offered Zara a promotion to head up the company's new social impact division, focusing on education initiatives and community development, a role perfectly aligned with her passions and her skills. The salary was substantial, providing her with financial security she had never known before, and the work was exactly what she was passionate about, a chance to make a real difference in the world. "It's not charity," he had explained when she expressed concerns about accepting the position, worried about perceptions of favoritism or tokenism. "It's recognition of your talents and what you can contribute to this company. You've already proven you can handle anything I throw at you. Now I want to see what you can accomplish when you're pursuing your own vision." The transition hadn't been without challenges. The path to her new role fraught with obstacles and uncertainties. There had been awkward conversations with former colleagues who weren't sure how to relate to her new position, uncertain how to bridge the gap that had suddenly widened between them. Skeptical articles and business publications questioning whether she was qualified for such a role, scrutinizing her credentials and dissecting her past. An ongoing gossip about her relationship with Ryan, speculation and innuendo swirling around them like a constant storm. But there had also been victories, moments of triumph that validated her hard work and her unwavering commitment. The education initiative she had designed was already showing promising results in 3 pilot schools, transforming the lives of students and their families. Her presentation to the board about sustainable community development had earned a standing ovation and approval for a $5 million expansion of the program, a testament to her vision and her leadership. And most importantly, her mother's cancer treatment was going well. With access to better doctors and experimental treatments that were no longer financially out of reach, Carmen Washington was responding well to therapy and had regained much of her strength, her vibrant spirit shining through once more. "You look happy?" came a familiar voice from her office doorway, a voice that always brought a smile to her face. Zara looked up to see Ryan standing there with 2 cups of coffee, just as he had done countless mornings when she was his assistant, a small gesture of kindness that had always brightened her day. But now the dynamic was completely different. The power imbalance that had once defined their relationship shifted and transformed. He was bringing her coffee because he wanted to, not because it was her job to anticipate his needs, a simple act of affection that spoke volumes about the depth of their connection. "I am happy," she said, accepting the coffee gratefully, her eyes sparkling with joy. "The Henderson Foundation just approved our proposal for the mentorship program. We'll be able to help 50 more students next year." "That's fantastic," Ryan said, settling into the chair across from her desk, his gaze filled with admiration. "Though I have to admit, I'm a little nervous about the board meeting this afternoon." Zara raised an eyebrow, a playful glint in her eyes. You nervous? The man who just closed a billion-dollar acquisition is nervous about a board meeting? This one's different, he said, his voice softening, his expression turning serious. This one matters. She knew what he meant, the unspoken tension hanging in the air between them. Today's board meeting would determine whether their relationship could continue on its current trajectory, whether they could find a way to navigate the complex challenges of their professional and personal lives, or whether the complications of working together would force them to make difficult choices, to sacrifice their personal happiness for the sake of the company. The company had a strict policy about relationships between employees at different levels, a policy designed to prevent conflicts of interest and maintain a level playing field. And while Zara's promotion had helped address some of the power imbalance, the fact remained that Ryan was still the CEO and majority owner, the ultimate authority within the organization. They had been dating for 2 months now, taking things slowly and carefully, allowing their relationship to unfold naturally, without the pressure of external expectations. Ryan had been patient and respectful, understanding that Zara needed time to trust that his feelings were genuine and not just the result of guilt or novelty, to overcome her own insecurities and believe that she was worthy of his love. Their first real date had been at a small restaurant in Brooklyn, far from the glittering world of Manhattan society events, a quiet and intimate setting where they could truly connect without the distractions and the pressures of their respective worlds. Ryan had been nervous and charming, asking questions about her childhood, her dreams, her mother's condition, and really listening to her answers, hanging on her every word. I want to know everything about you, he had said over dinner, his eyes filled with sincerity. Not the professional version you show at work, but the real Zara. What makes you laugh? What keeps you up at night? What do you want your life to look like in 10 years? It had been the beginning of something real and substantial, built on genuine connection rather than the artificial circumstances of that first gala, a foundation of mutual respect and admiration. But they both knew that their professional relationship was becoming complicated, that the whispers and the speculation were starting to take a toll. The board was concerned about appearances, worried about the potential for scandal and the impact on the company's reputation. Other employees were gossiping, creating a climate of unease and resentment. And business publications were speculating about whether Zara's position was legitimate or just an expensive way for Ryan to continue their relationship, undermining her credibility and questioning her accomplishments. Whatever happens today, Ryan said, reaching across the desk to take her hand, his touch warm and reassuring. I want you to know that these past 3 months have been the happiest of my life. You've brought so much joy and meaning into my world, and I'm grateful for every moment we've shared. Don't talk like this is goodbye, Zara said, squeezing his fingers, her voice laced with emotion. We'll figure it out. We always do. What if the board says we can't continue working together? He asked, his brow furrowed with concern, the question hanging heavy in the air between them. Then we'll have some decisions to make, she replied, her voice firm but gentle. But we'll make them together as a team. Whatever happens, we'll face it together. The board meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m., and as the time approached, Zara found herself thinking about how much her life had changed since that night at the Plaza Hotel, the night that had set everything in motion. She had proven that she belonged in this world, not because of what she wore or who she was dating, but because of what she could contribute, the value she could bring to the table. She had earned her place, silencing the doubters and defying the expectations of those who had underestimated her. At exactly 2 p.m., she and Ryan walked into the boardroom together, hand in hand, a united front against whatever challenges lay ahead. The 12 members of the board were already seated, their expressions serious and businesslike, their eyes fixed on them as they entered the room. Thank you all for coming, Ryan began, his voice calm and professional, addressing the assembled board members. As you know, we're here to discuss the company's relationship policies and how they apply to Ms. Washington and myself. Board Chairman William Harrison, a distinguished man in his 70s with a lifetime of experience in the business world, leaned forward, his gaze unwavering. Ryan, we want to be clear that our concerns are not about Ms. Washington's qualifications or performance. Her work on the social impact initiatives has been exemplary, and her results speak for themselves. We commend her for her dedication and her leadership. Then what are your concerns? Zara asked, her voice calm and professional, her eyes meeting theirs directly. Appearances, said board member Patricia Chin, a sharp and articulate woman with a keen understanding of public relations. The business community is watching this situation closely. Some are questioning whether your relationship began before your promotion, whether there was favoritism involved, whether this sets a problematic precedent for the company. I understand your concerns, Zara replied, her voice steady and confident. And I want to be completely transparent with you. Ryan and I began dating after my promotion, but our working relationship had been developing over the 2 years I was his assistant. I earned this position based on my qualifications and performance, not because of any romantic involvement. I'm confident that I can continue to fulfill my responsibilities with the highest level of professionalism and integrity. The question, said another board member, a seasoned executive with a pragmatic approach to business, is whether you can continue in your current role while maintaining a relationship with the CEO. The potential for conflicts of interest, for perceptions of impropriety, for complications if the relationship doesn't work out. It's a risk that we need to carefully consider. Ryan started to speak, to defend Zara and their relationship, but she held up a hand to stop him, her eyes conveying a silent message of reassurance. She had something to say, and she wanted to say it herself, to take control of the narrative and address their concerns directly. I've given this a lot of thought, she said, standing up to address the board directly, her voice filled with conviction. And I have a proposal. She walked to the presentation screen and pulled up a document she had prepared, a meticulously crafted plan that addressed all of their concerns. I'm proposing to take a leave of absence from Mitchell Technologies to pursue my MBA full-time, with the understanding that I would return in 18 months to head up a new subsidiary focused exclusively on social impact investing, she said, her voice ringing with confidence. The room was silent as the board members absorbed this unexpected development, their faces a mixture of surprise and intrigue. The subsidiary would be legally separate from Mitchell Technologies, with its own board and its own funding sources. She continued, elaborating on her plan. I would be the CEO, reporting to a board that includes community leaders, education experts, and social impact specialists. This would eliminate any appearance of impropriety while allowing me to pursue the work I'm passionate about, to build something meaningful and sustainable. Ryan stared at her in amazement, his eyes filled with admiration and pride. She had been working on this plan without telling him, preparing a solution that would address the board's concerns while advancing her own career goals, a testament to her intelligence and her ambition. Furthermore, Zara continued, her voice unwavering, Ryan would recuse himself from any decisions involving the subsidiary's funding or operations. Our professional relationship would be completely separate from our personal relationship, ensuring that there would be no conflicts of interest or undue influence. This is quite unexpected, Chairman Harrison said, breaking the silence, his voice filled with a mixture of surprise and approval. How would this subsidiary be funded? What's your plan for securing the necessary resources? I've already secured preliminary commitments from 3 major foundations and 2 impact investing firms, Zara replied, her voice confident and assured. They're interested in partnering with someone who has demonstrated results in this space, someone with a proven track record of success, combined with an initial investment from Mitchell Technologies, which would be approved by the board based on business merits alone. We would have sufficient funding to operate independently, to build a sustainable and impactful organization. The board members looked at each other, clearly impressed by the thoroughness of her proposal, the meticulous planning and the strategic vision she had demonstrated. When did you develop this plan? Ryan asked, his voice filled with admiration and awe, his eyes fixed on her. I've been working on it for the past month, Zara admitted, a hint of a smile playing on her lips. I knew we needed a solution that would address everyone's concerns while allowing us to build something meaningful together, both professionally and personally. I wanted to create a win-win situation that would benefit everyone involved. Board member Robert Chung spoke up, his voice filled with enthusiasm. This is actually quite brilliant. It addresses all of our concerns about conflicts of interest, while potentially creating significant value for the company's social impact portfolio. It's a creative and innovative solution that demonstrates Zara's exceptional leadership skills. I'd like to make one addition to the proposal, Ryan said, standing up beside Zara, his eyes filled with love and admiration. I think this subsidiary should be a completely independent entity, with Zara as the founder and majority owner. Mitchell Technologies can be an investor and partner, but this should be her company, her vision, her success. I want her to have the freedom and the autonomy to build something truly extraordinary, without any constraints or limitations. The gesture was both romantic and practical, demonstrating his commitment to supporting her career without trying to control or own it, a testament to his respect for her independence and her ambition. I'll need time to consider this, Chairman Harrison said, his voice thoughtful. But I have to say, Ms. Washington, this proposal shows exactly the kind of strategic thinking and leadership we hoped to see when you were promoted. You've exceeded our expectations, and we're impressed by your vision and your determination. Thank you, sir, Zara replied, her voice filled with gratitude and humility. I'd welcome the opportunity to discuss the details further, to answer any questions you may have and to elaborate on my plan. As the board meeting concluded and the members filed out, Ryan and Zara found themselves alone in the conference room, the silence broken only by the soft hum of the air conditioning. You amazing, brilliant woman, Ryan said, pulling her into his arms, his voice filled with emotion. You've been planning this for a month and didn't tell me. I'm so impressed. I wanted to make sure it was viable before I mentioned it, Zara explained, her voice softening. And I wanted to be sure you would support it, even if it meant we wouldn't be working together directly. I didn't want to pressure you or put you in an awkward position. Are you kidding? Ryan replied, his voice filled with disbelief. I'm so proud of you. I can barely contain myself. You're going to change the world with this company, Zara. You're going to make a real difference in people's lives. We're going to change the world, Zara corrected, a smile playing on her lips. Just in a different way than we originally planned. We'll still be partners, just in a different capacity. 6 months later, Zara stood in the renovated office space in downtown Brooklyn that would house Social Impact Partners, the company she had founded with support from Mitchell Technologies and several other investors. A dream come true. Her MBA was progressing well, challenging her and expanding her horizons. Her mother was in remission, her health restored and her spirits high. And the pilot programs she had designed were showing remarkable results, transforming the lives of countless individuals and communities. Ryan appeared in the doorway, carrying a bottle of champagne and wearing a grin that suggested he had good news, his eyes sparkling with excitement. The Henderson Foundation just committed another $2 million to the education initiative, he announced, his voice filled with joy. And Senator Richardson wants to feature your work in his upcoming legislation on education reform. You're making waves, Zara. That's wonderful, Zara said, accepting a glass of champagne, her heart filled with gratitude. But you look like you have more news. What's that mischievous glint in your eyes? I do, Ryan said, setting down his glass and reaching into his jacket pocket, his movements deliberate and meaningful. He pulled out a small velvet box, his eyes fixed on her, his expression filled with love and devotion. Zara's heart stopped as he dropped to one knee in the middle of her empty office, the moment suspended in time. Zara Washington, he said, his voice thick with emotion, his eyes shining with tears. You've changed my life in every possible way. You've made me a better man, a better leader, and a better human being. You've shown me what real partnership looks like, what real love feels like, and what it means to build something meaningful together. Tears were streaming down Zara's face as he opened the box to reveal a stunning but elegant ring, a symbol of his unwavering love and commitment. Will you marry me? He asked, his voice filled with hope and vulnerability. Will you be my partner in everything business, life, changing the world, raising a family, growing old together? Will you continue to challenge me and inspire me and make me want to be worthy of you every single day? Yes, she whispered, her voice barely audible, overcome with emotion, then louder, with unwavering conviction. Yes, of course, yes. As Ryan slipped the ring onto her finger and stood to kiss her, Zara thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment, the twists and turns, the challenges and triumphs, the unexpected detours and the serendipitous encounters. It had started with a cruel joke, a bet among wealthy friends who saw her as entertainment, a disposable pawn in their shallow games. But it had become something real and beautiful and lasting, a testament to the power of love, the resilience of the human spirit, and the transformative potential of a single act of kindness. The woman who had once felt like an outsider, a stranger in a foreign land, had found her place in the world, not by conforming to expectations or compromising her values, but by embracing her authenticity, pursuing her passions, and building a life filled with purpose and meaning. The woman who had nervously walked into that ballroom wearing a borrowed dress and borrowed jewelry was gone. In her place stood someone entirely different, someone who had discovered her own inner strength, her own sense of purpose, and her rightful place in the grand scheme of things. And the man who had initially invited her as a mere object of amusement had transformed into someone she could wholeheartedly trust with the most precious parts of herself: her heart, her dreams, and her hopes for the future. "I love you," Ryan murmured against her lips, his voice full of genuine emotion. "I love you, too," she responded, her voice filled with matching sincerity. "And I can't wait to see all the amazing things we're going to build together." Beyond the expansive windows of their brand-new office, the sprawling borough of Brooklyn reached out towards the iconic skyline of Manhattan. Two distinct worlds, seamlessly connected by bridges both literal and figurative, dreams both shared and individual, and the boundless potential of what could be achieved when people were able to look beyond superficial appearances and see the genuine truth that lies beneath. Their story had started off on the wrong foot, marred by cruelty and rife with misunderstandings, but it was now drawing to a close, culminating in a profound love, a deep respect, and the kind of equitable partnership that had the power to transform not only their own individual lives, but also the lives of countless others. As they stood side by side in their empty office, excitedly sketching out a future brimming with both purpose and passion, Zara knew, with unwavering certainty, that she had finally found exactly where she belonged, not strictly in Ryan's pre-established world, nor exclusively in the world she had always known, but in the exciting new world that they were collaboratively and enthusiastically creating together. The joke that brought them together had blossomed into a real-life love story, and that love story was just